This is the Wally and Methot Show, powered by Barhaven Ford. Now here are your hosts, Brent Wallace and Marc Methot.
Welcome to the Wally Methot Show and our own very live version of the Labor Day Classic, powered by Barhaven Ford. I'm Brent Wallace. He's Marc Methot, and coming up a bit later in the show, our super duper guest of the day, Dave Poulin, who not only does a lot of work for TSN, of course, you know, but now writing as a freelance columnist for the Toronto Star. As always, we're monitoring the chat and answering some of your questions later in the show. Less than 3 weeks to go before training camp. In fact, I think it's just over 2 weeks now. Meth, can you feel the excitement in the air? I know for you at this time of the year, you didn't always seem excited about training camp starting.
No, I'm never a huge fan of camp. I think the game's changed now where players are showing up in much better shape. Certainly that was the case when I was playing as well, where you're ready to go. But I think fitness testing, no matter, and I'm sure Pooley can touch on this when we bring him in a little bit, there's always going to be anxiety. You can be in the best shape of your life, but knowing that you have to do some of those tests with other elite athletes and you don't want to be at the bottom, there's always some nerves there. So those are little challenges that you go through as an athlete, certainly in hockey, when you're playing. And once that gets behind you and you start playing exhibition games, I feel like the coaching staff just throws those papers aside and focus on the games. And I think that's what the players are going to be looking forward towards.
Did you do that like beep test? Is that the worst thing?
Well, it's like a shuttle skate, like what we would do, where you're kind of going down and back and you're being timed on your recovery. And they even check your blood afterwards, I believe. I think they go and prick you really quickly as well. So it gets pretty, it got pretty complex as the years went on, where they've got these new techniques now that they use to measure your cardiovascular ability and your strength, and shuttle runs off the ice. Everything's timed. So, and there's injuries happen too. And that's all part of the training camp experience.
I think Pager like blew out his knee or his ankle.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. Right? That was the shuttle run, the back and forth, side to side shuttle run. Yeah, it's a nightmare. Yeah.
All right. Quickly before we bring in Dave Poulin, last week, Meth, I got to go over to Barhaven Ford, and as you know, they've got that Bronco sitting there, and so, but they don't just have a regular Bronco sitting there. They have got the all-new BFC lineup of Roush-inspired custom vehicles, along with the Rangers, the F-150s, and the Mustang. So I took out the newest teammate, the Bronco, and this thing is sweet. So I took it.
So they let you drive one? They actually let Brent Wallace get in a vehicle? Okay, well, you'd have to sanitize that sucker down afterwards.
I don't really know how many people knew I took it. So anyway, this thing is sweet. I even had a player reach out and DM me and ask if I could help him get one and hook him up with one. I said, get in line because there's not a lot and everybody wants one. Anyway, as a customer, you don't have to wait in line. Head on over to Barhaven Ford. Go check out the newest lineup of Broncos. Also, their used vehicles. They have a sale coming up 16th to the 18th of September. And of course, you can visit them on barhavenford.com. Now, it is our pleasure to welcome perhaps one of the finest human beings on the face of the earth, terrific hockey player turned coach. He was a manager, excellent broadcaster, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, now a writer with the Toronto Star. Dave Poulin, Philadelphia Flyer star captain, along with the Capitals and the Bruins. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. Let me get a plug in for your sponsor right away, because I was down at a Flyers fantasy camp last week, and none other than Billy Barber wheeled up in a brand new Ford Bronco, and he was so proud of it. And it was, it was the early hit. You wheel into the parking lot and something new like that, and you know this, Mark, a lot of eyes are attracted. So the fantasy campers were very impressed with Bill Barber's ride. So let's get that in there for the sponsor right away.
That's so good. I got a short story about Bill Barber. Is my father-in-law owned a cottage in North Bay, and Bill Barber's brother used to live down the road. Anyway, Barber would rent our cottage for a month every summer and stay in it. So one time, I've got all this signed old Flyer stuff at home. It includes, I think, Dave, I got a card of yours or something. Anyway, Bill Barber, one of the big family friends at our house. So that's my Bill Barber story. Anyway,
that was, we're going to go all over the place here with this, I can tell, but that was my first pro left winger in the NHL in exhibition season was Bill Barber and Ricky McLeish on the right. Like, talk about stepping in the league, right? And the first game was in Montreal. And I told this story last week, and Billy pulled me aside beforehand and he said, kid, you're a really great skater. Like, you're a really, really good skater. So in the defensive zone, you get the puck, you skate it out of the defensive zone. Ricky and I don't want it in the defensive zone. Now, when we get to the neutral zone, you're a good skater. Just fly through that neutral zone with the puck. Because Ricky and I don't really want it in the neutral zone either. You know, I mean, yeah, you can give it to us, but we're going to give it right back. Now, when that great skating gets you to the offensive zone, that's where Ricky and I want the puck. So and all I could think was, man, Billy Barber thinks I'm a great skater.
That's so good. Awesome. Okay, we're going to get to all these Flyer stories later because I've got a ton of questions for you just from your career. But first, as always, I want to get to the headlines and want you to help us get through what's now starting to be a little bit more newsworthy as we get closer to training camp. So here we go. Here are our headlines for today, Poulin. Bobby Big Wheel, that is Drake Batherson, signs a new 6-year deal worth almost $30 million for the Ottawa Senators. Brady's bunch of cash. How much is Brady Tkachuk actually going to get if he does sign this RFA deal very soon? The $6 million man. Oh, this is the bone of contention, right? The Jesperi Kotkaniemi saga. It's over for now. Prep school, and this is a big one for Poulin, who was a coach at Notre Dame, and that is the NCAA the way to go, or is it the CHL? What's better for getting guys to the NHL? And then, of course, the Broad Street Bullies versus the Danbury Trashers. Who'd be better? Now, I'm hoping that you've actually seen this Netflix documentary so we can talk about it.
I have a good idea.
Okay, good. Bobby Big Wheel, and that is Drake Batherson, nicknamed Bobby, signs a 6-year deal, average $4.975 million. There's no signing bonus as usual with the Ottawa Senators. It's back-end loaded. It seems to be I haven't seen anybody really complain about this deal. Poulin, what's your thoughts on this deal?
Sometimes a deal works for both the player and the team, and that sounds unusual, but I think it was going to be, the last 18 months have been so strange for everyone. And as it's grown, it's going to be, okay, short-term, long-term. Do I bet on myself? Do I try and get through this? And the way the players have done it is just as you talked, whereas it used to be we have to front-end load it and get our big signing bonuses up early. Now you're pushing that money back because the first couple of years of this deal are going to be heavily escrowed. And so that's what the escrow percentage is higher. And so why are you going to take less? So you're going to take as least money as you can in these first couple of years because they're going to be heavily affected with the holdings. And so I like the deal. Pretty small body of work, but that is by the organization's choice and the players' the players work in Belleville. And guys, I'll hit on this a number of times in this. I think development is every bit as significant as drafting right now. I really do, because I'm watching players drafted high in the draft that aren't developed, and I'm watching players come from lower down that are seemingly through the development model, i.e. Tampa Bay. And you're watching this happen, and maybe the importance of the American League coach has increased even more than it ever has in the National Hockey League. So I like what they've done with Batherson in terms of his development. I watched him. I did his first game, so saw his first goal. And, and I get a nice feel for it when I'm down between the benches there. And I didn't think I'd like between the benches, by the way. I thought I'm not going to be able to see very well. And I was likening it to coaching. When you're behind the bench, everyone's standing up all the time, and you're worried about who's up next, and you're looking at the players, and you're worried about managing the game. When you're broadcasting in Ottawa, you're right there, and you can move right up, and there's no glass in front of you. And I really, really enjoyed it. So I saw, firsthand at that level, Batherson step into the league, and he showed just great signs. And then, to their credit and to the players' acceptance, he knew, or he maybe didn't know, because nobody at that age thinks they know that they're not ready for the NHL, but he understood that they wanted him to develop to a different level. And you don't just want to play in the NHL. You want to contribute in the NHL. And, guys will say, I can play there. I know I can play there. I'm better than him. Or I'm better than him. Yeah, a lot of guys can play there for 8 games, 10 games, 20 games, maybe half a year. But you wanted Drake Batherson to be a contributor, to be a significant top 6 player. And I think through the growth and development there and the building of the support group around him, and it almost looked like for a little while there, it became pretty cool to play in Belleville with those group of guys they had. They were all pushing for the top in the league and scoring, and they were really, and they were doing it together. And, and you can just see the strength of that group together. And I think Batherson's a big part of it. So bottom line is I like the deal. I like the term and where it pushes him to. He's a little bit older now. And so overall, I'm in favor of the deal, both from the player standpoint And, say what you want about, did I leave a little money on the table? Could I have signed a short bridge? That's a lot of jeans and sneakers, guys. And once you have one pair of jeans on and you have a really nice pair of sneakers, you don't need a lot else in life. And that's a lot of jeans and sneakers for Drake Batherson.
I agree. And to your point there, Poulin, and I wanted to know your 2 cents on this. And again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot because I know you're covering so many friggin' teams. Dorion was quoted as saying that he can kind of see him potentially reaching that 35 to 40 goal mark at some point. Do you see that in his shot? I know it's fairly elite, but I don't have that same sense when I'm watching these forwards like you do. So I'd love to hear what you think about that.
I do think he can score that much, and as much because of what he has, I think, learned to do away from the puck. And when you're away from the puck and you can release the puck like that, and you can put yourself in a position to release the puck, that's really encouraging. And he's playing with some good players.
Yes.
And that's a big thing. He comes in the league. Can he score 30 or 35? You're like, I don't know. And then you see how much attention, if this configuration stays Tkachuk, Norris, and Batherson, how much attention Brady Tkachuk draws. So first of all, if you're a D partner, Mark, you know when he's on the ice, and you're looking to help your D partner out with Tkachuk because you know what a load he is in front of the net.
100%.
So what does that do for the right shot on that line?
Yeah, it opens
if you're the
right
lefty
up.
And you're going over to help out a little bit with the bulk of Tkachuk. And Norris is a nifty player, guys. He's a really nifty player, and he's kind of a combo platter in that he's willing to shoot the puck. And he's got a real nice little like a wrist roll when he's on the half boards. Yeah. And so you can see Batherson getting that center slot, Tkachuk down low and that center slot, and them using Batherson either wide on that power play if you wanted to open up the middle for Shabbat, or right in the center slot for that little feed, either down low to Tkachuk or straight in from Norris. So complimenting the players around him, I think he is capable of scoring to that level.
Well, that'll make Sens fans happy. I'm glad to hear it.
That's all we're here to do, isn't it?
That's right.
Absolutely. By the way, Batherson, 23 years old, 99 career games, 23 goals, 53 points. Of course, this particular topic brought to you by, as I forgot earlier, so I apologize, Whitewater Brewery. Check them out, shop whitewater.ca. Use the Wally Methot coupon code, 15% off. Quickly to point out, Batherson will make $2.5 million this year. You talk about the escrow thing. That's a pretty low number compared to his last 2 years of his deal. He'll make $6.5 million. So you can see
the other thing is, Wally, is that then becomes a jumping off point for the QO on the next deal, right? So
correct.
So that's ideally that's in the player's favor. Now, there's been other teams that have written $15 million signing bonus checks on July 1st. And if I'm a player and they're doing that, it's pretty hard to argue with that as well. But those are going to be heavily banged over the next couple of years.
I'm always surprised that the Ottawa Senators are managed. They get away from signing bonuses. Like Thomas Chabot, 8 years, 64, does not have a signing bonus. And I forget who else just recently signed. There's no signing bonuses attached to these deals. And it shocks me when you see the rest of the league get them, that these players manage to not sign these deals and work towards.
Well, when you're dangling $64 million in front of a player coming out of his entry-level contract, it's a little easier to poach those guys versus the free agents and other signings, right?
Well, the other piece of that is, a money manager will tell you, of course, I'd rather have the money up front, but guess what? We're not going to be out there rolling the dice with this money anyway. You've got not only career-changing money, but you've got generational money for your family. And, and so now you're talking percentages and, give it to a good money manager and you'll be just fine.
Yeah. Let's talk more money and we'll move on to the second topic. We'll be here for the next 4 hours. Brady's bunch of cash. How long does the negotiation drag on? And this should basically be brought to you by Bonisher Excavating, because they can just back up the dump truck and dump the piles of cash in his driveway. Of course, visit BonisherExcavating.com for all your aggregate needs and rental of equipment.
I love it.
I'm doing the best I can here.
That's good.
Really, how much is he worth? So should he be the highest paid Ottawa Senator? If you look at, in the jumping off point is obviously Thomas Chabot at 8 years at $8 million a year, or is he less than that? And of course, when you see Batherson at $5 million per year, there's got to be somewhere in there where Brady Tkachuk is. And then you look at Kotkaniemi, which we'll get to in a sec. How do you justify where Brady Tkachuk should be? And if you are Brady Tkachuk, I know there's a lot of questions. Should there be the bridge deal for him?
Yeah, that's your own comfort level. It's such a personal thing. It's almost like the question you're going to ask me, should you go to college or play junior? It's very, very personal. And, you might look at Brady Tkachuk and say, well, his dad, I think, his dad was always involved in contract negotiations, it seemed like, when he played. And, his brother signed a bridge deal. So there you have a peer in the family and a comp in the family, but at a different time, pre-pandemic, not the same. And it may be just the individual's comfort. And Brady may look at this and say, look, I understand all that. Svechnikov, I think you should throw in there as a talking point. And you may look at it and say, I'm comfortable being in Ottawa with this group of guys, and I think we can be a part of something special. And if there's a slight premium lost on that, or a slight, I decide to take X number of dollars at X number of years, it's north of Drake Batherson for me. I keep looking at Svechnikov. I think Brady is a special player. And does he have to be the highest paid player on the team? Yeah, I think you get away with that a little bit because of the position. And, and there's only a handful of defensemen that make big money in the league. I mean, that's how well Thomas Chabot is thought of. I know this summer there's been some nice signings, but those are elite players, guys. And there are more forwards, and they're just flat out are. So I think, I was a conservative guy as a player in different situations, not a high draft pick and not a draft pick period. But, I always felt if I was comfortable with my term and my money, I couldn't be concerned with what Timmy Kerr was making or Brian Propp was making. I was worried about myself and my family, and I just didn't worry about it. I simply didn't. And so I think he'll find a comfort level. I can see him not doing the same thing as his brother did. Now, when all this pandemic started, I thought a lot of guys would roll the dice on themselves and sign bridge deals because the money's not in the market. I mean, it's easy. If I'm a manager right now, I'm just like, guys, it's fine to say we don't have the money in the market. But yet you're seeing some long-term deals. And I think that goes to the personal nature of this. I mean, there's some guys who are more conservative who just say, you know what, it's not about ego for me, because the difference between $8 and $8.1 million is simply ego, correct? I mean, it really is. Yeah, and right. Who's the highest paid, and and maybe we're the least ego-driven sport that there is of the major sports. So you're seeing some contracts signed, and don't raise your eyebrows, because if it's personal comfort level and that player thrives at that dollar figure, that's what it's about for the organization.
Okay, so then I'm glad you brought up Svechnikov. I think that's a great comparable, and he's got 7.75, I believe, is his AAV. So are we looking north of that then? Like, would an 8x8 contract look fairly understanding in this situation?
Yeah, I think it could. I think right around there. Once again, if you gave me that number, I'd be fine with it, and I'd be fine with comparing myself to that player. And what that player's, the impact he's had on the National Hockey League and the impact he's going to have on the National Hockey League. Different market, how do you even compare Carolina and Ottawa, as markets? I don't know, I mean,
that's hard to do.
It's really hard to do. So personal preference, if that were put on the table today and I were Brady Tkachuk, that would be a long day for me looking at that.
Yeah. And Poulin, I guess my last question from my end here, at least, there's a lot of chatter in the Sens world right now with regards to where's Brady at the moment? Is he going to fly to Ottawa prior to camp despite not having a deal, or is he going to stay back home? What are your thoughts with that? And what should be comforting news to the Sens? Like, should we just tell them it's okay? He doesn't need to be in Ottawa. This is normal when it comes to this kind of process.
He doesn't need to be in Ottawa, but I believe he needs to be in Ottawa for the start of camp. I mean, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of guys missing camp. I never have been. Boy, oh boy, if you give me 100 cases of it, I'll tell you 99 that didn't turn out very well.
That's the coach in you right now too, probably, right?
You know what? It's the coach, it's the manager. But it was the player too, Mark. It really was. Yeah. It bugged me when guys miss camp, because I'm like, hey, guys, you've had all summer to do this. Bug your agent, pound your agent. Don't tell your agent he's got other stuff to do. I mean, you pound him. You're one of his key guys. You pound him. And I was a guy about getting the deal done. Like, get it done.
Yeah. And especially in this case, right? If he's potentially your captain, I mean, what does that say when it comes to setting a precedent moving forward, right? And I think that resonates throughout the group as well.
I don't like the distraction. Yeah, I don't like the distraction, and I don't like the physical element of missing camp. I don't.
Of course.
And the longer it goes, man, those guys come back and all of a sudden they have so much to prove and somebody's popping a groin or, trying to do something Injuries. They didn't do. And you're like, nah, you know what? And the guys that they line up with, even if they're a week ahead at pure camp level, you're behind. You're flat out behind.
Totally agree.
Last question on this, because you were the captain of the Philadelphia Flyers, storied franchise. They are dangling. They want whoever is signed to a long-term deal to be the captain of the Ottawa Senators, meaning if Brady signs a bridge, he doesn't get it. Is that fair to negotiate that way?
No, I think the captain's the captain. And sometimes it doesn't matter on whom you put the letter. You can put the letter on somebody and the rest of the group goes, yeah, well, he's not really the captain. And reliving it last week, as I mentioned, I was back at the fantasy camp. I was asked the question. I was a captain my second year in the league, which was totally ridiculous. And I always made sure that I said I was following Bobby Clarke as captain. I wasn't replacing Bobby Clarke as captain. Give me a break, And I thought a lot. It really hurt me right away. I'd had a really good rookie year. Now, understand too, I was 4 years of college and a full year in Europe, and then a full year in the NHL, and then captain. And so it was a little bit different timeline. I was 24 years old, almost 25 when I was named captain. And so it was different, but still all the things that came at me that were off ice issues. And, I'm dealing with this rookie coach named Mike Keenan, who was an absolute maniac. And I'm the liaison between him and the team. And all of the different things, like somebody having problems at home, somebody having this, somebody having problems with an agent, with a contract, as you talked about. Captains do a lot of things behind the scenes, and I don't like putting that on a young player's plate unless I'm absolutely sure that he's ready for it. And I had a lot of guidance, and, and some of those guys I saw last week, and Brad Marsh was terrific in his support. He'd been a young captain in Atlanta and /Calgary. Mark Howe was unbelievable. The dear departed Brad McCrimmon was just special in the way they embraced me and supported me as captain. So that would look to the older guys in the Ottawa locker room right now, who say, if in fact Brady Tkachuk were named captain, the support group around him has to be ironclad and has to be really, really, both protective of him, divert things from him that he shouldn't be handling. And because the first thing I thought was, I had a great rookie year. Like, okay, what do they want from me now? Do I need, what do I need to do? And you're analyzing every situation. You lose a couple games in a row. Do I call a meeting? I don't know. And so it's a lot on your plate. And I think it is more so.
Was it tough for you? Because that's a pretty strong dressing room.
Yeah, no, I did, because I had those guys standing beside me. And I mean, I don't know what was said behind the scenes, but it was pretty clear. And we had some quiet guys that were gentle giants in that room, Timmy Kerr being one of them, Dave Brown, a really young Dave Brown, coming to the league, some of the tough guys and some of the guys, I just had a lot of support. And I also had a coach who in his study of leadership, believed chaos worked better than anything. So, I mean, he made things really chaotic for me and to handle. And, and sometimes he'd look at this podcast right now and say, okay, how can I create controversy here? And I'd say, yeah, I think it's been pretty good so far. We're a few minutes in, it's going pretty well. No. If we create controversy, it'll be better. And you're like, no, it won't. Three of us are having dinner. We're fine, Mike. We don't need to create controversy at this table. But he was what he was. He was effective in what he did, but a large part of it was dealing with him, and then in turn dealing with the players. But that strong group accepting it was huge.
Yeah, interesting. I'm coming back to Mike Keenan after. Number 3 on our topics: $6 Million Man. Presented by sportsinteraction.com/Wally Methot. Get your account set up today. Get ready for the upcoming NFL season. Starts on Thursday. Sportsinteraction.com, Canada's online sports book. And that is, if you were a betting man, Poulin, the Jesperi Kotkaniemi saga, who won this? And you can even say Arizona if you want to.
Yeah. Billy Armstrong was coy in holding Dvorak until after this was available, because there were other people that wanted him. And so that was a coy move by Arizona and Billy Armstrong. Marc Bergevin reacted very well in that I think he got a pretty good player in Christian Dvorak. I think he's a 3, guys. I think he's going to be typecast as a 2. I think he's a 3. He could be a 40 to 50 point guy. I do think Suzuki is going to be a 1 in Montreal. Maybe not quite there yet, but I think he's a 1, but along the likes of an 80, 90.1, a 70.1, and I don't throw this around lightly. I see a young Patrice Bergeron in Nick Suzuki and the way he plays the game.
Wow.
Yeah. That good defensively, Mark. Like that aware. You would love him because every time you would look up, his stick blade would be 5 feet away from yours if you were coming around the net or in the corner. Yeah. And one of the first things I saw in him was he moved his stick in training camp around the other side of a player to make a little outlet pass for Weber. And I thought, okay, that's different, right? Like if every time you look up as a defenseman and your number 1 center is 10 feet away from you and open, that's a different player. And I think Nick Suzuki is. So I think there's potentially your number 1 in Montreal. Dvorak has to be a number 2. They simply don't have someone else to do that. And, and I say these numbers, and let's face it, Philippe Danault was miscast as a number 1 center in the National Hockey League. Mm-hmm. It just was. It wasn't his fault. But I was miscast as a number 1 center in the National Hockey League for my first couple of years. And I say this humbly, guys, when you lose in the finals and their second line center is wearing an Edmonton jersey with number 11 on it, that probably means you're not a good enough first line center to beat that team, right? I mean, that's just common sense. I mean, Messi was a good player. And their number 1 center was really good. So, and hey, Danault did a great job in doing what he did and was the de facto number 1 center, but he wasn't a number 1 center. And so Dvorak, I think on a really good competitive team is a really good number 3. And I've talked to a number of people about him over the weekend. And I knew him going back to, he's a Chicago kid. So I'd watched him and really, does he have an offensive upside from what he's shown? He might with better players, and he's going to get better players and better wingers in Montreal. He's a big point guy in that London Knights team in junior. And, he's a good size. He's really good on faceoffs. I mean, he's terrific on faceoffs. And I think he might have been as high as a 55% guy already in the league. So, Bergevin reacted well to losing Kotkaniemi. And essentially, guys, you traded Kotkaniemi for Dvorak. I mean, essentially, that's what you did at a much better number. It's in the 4s, and he's 4 more years. And so that's what you've done. You've rolled the dice of the future of Kotkaniemi, who I like Kotkaniemi, but you've rolled the dice of the future of him at 6.1 moving forward for the security of a player who's all round today. He's better. He's 4 years older. And you may have made today's team better in terms of what he brings, Dvorak brings right now. Kotkaniemi's got the upside and the roll of the dice with it. And so, you have to factor in it. The firsts are protected. There's a lot of language in there. Yeah. The second isn't until 2024 for Montreal going back. So if you weigh it all out, you've essentially traded Kotkaniemi on a 1-year deal at 6.1 for, Christian Dvorak on a 4-year deal at $4+ million.
Okay, so let me put it to you this way. You used to be the Leafs VP of Hockey Operations. You were the GM of the Marlies, but now you're also on the broadcast side. As a broadcaster, do you love the carnage that this has created? And would you be pulling your hair out as a member of the Leafs at this? Would you consider this to be nonsense of what the Carolina Hurricanes have done?
I don't. The delivery pointed that way, Wally. I think the delivery, the language, the $20 signing bonus, it all pointed to sort of a ludicrousness that was like, it was like, really? But they got a young player in a year in which they have cap space. And there was, I would say there's a Finnish influence here. They've got, pretty heavy Finn presence on that team. And they like this young player. He's a personable young kid. Does this let them push Jordan Staal into the 4 hole? And if that's the case, yeah, that's a load in the 4 hole, isn't it?
But Don Waddell said they're going to move him to left wing.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me.
I don't. Yeah, it is. It is.
I don't see that. I don't see that at all. But anyway,
I think he's a centerman. I do. I think he's a centerman.
I agree.
So, and maybe that's short term. Maybe that's their short term thought, and maybe that was also said in light of, Jordan Stahl sitting on the other side of Waddell at some point and saying,
exactly.
"Oh, no, we're using him as a winger. We're using him as a winger." But Carolina has made some interesting moves because they lost the big one in Dougie Hamilton, but they got a sneaky replacement there in that Tony DeAngelo. He's had the off ice, situation going on, but from an offensive standpoint, they've added Ian Cole, they've added Ethan Bear. So, Carolina's, they're different than they were, and I don't mind that word, because if you haven't won, then dare to be different.
Exactly, agreed.
Would you be okay if you were in the management of that team to be what looks like they're the heels of the NHL at the moment when they actually bring in Tony DeAngelo? They're called a bunch of jerks. Like they try to push the limits because they're trying to interact with their fans. I get all that. I love it. Would you be okay on the management side, I guess?
If I were winning, I would.
For sure.
That's the bottom line, right? You got to win.
Yeah.
And Tom Dundon, guys, Montreal took a lot of heat for that offer sheet, that it wasn't positioned properly. The roll of the dice was the $20 million signing bonus. And up to that point, that owner had not shown a propensity to spend cash. He just hadn't. And so that was the roll of the dice. That was, and Sedgwick in Montreal is he's one of the guys that designed the cap with Brandon Pridham and in the NHL office. So, and so it wasn't a blind offer sheet to Aho. The clicker was the $20 million signing bonus to an owner that looked like he wasn't, throwing cash around at that point. He's got a lot of it, but he almost took that as a personal insult. That may have helped Carolina in the long run in spending money and pushing him to do that and saying, okay, it's okay. It's okay to do that because we got a really good player in Aho and we got him locked in. So I thought the delivery of the Carolina offer sheet was the only, like, the almost mocking Bergeron by putting the exact same language in it,
right?
Almost to a word. It was like, okay, you got a good player. You are rubbing it in a little bit, and,
which shocks me.
Even though their social media is brilliant, Wally.
Yes, it is.
It's very good. And it shocked me because I know Don Waddell a bit. Like he seems fairly stoic, and for this, you can tell this is completely outside of his comfort zone, almost in a way, right? Anyway.
Yeah, this appears to be, and I don't know Tom Dundon personally, but appears to me more Tom Dundon. And you know what? If he's a guy who's stepping up and he's paying his players now, and he may just have not wanted to pay the players he had, and that's his prerogative as well.
Yeah, fair enough. I just like the news that we're getting in the middle of, I guess, or the end of August. All right, moving on. Number 4, prep school, where you are very familiar with. So what's the latest, the best route of late with high-end NHL players? This is brought to you by gongshow.com. And of course, they just got their fall lineup of lids in gongshow.com, where also they have some merch of Wally Methot. You can go there and buy a Wally Methot hat or a t-shirt or a sweatshirt. They're very nice. Anyway, NCAA versus CHL. What's the best path to take? Now, just for people who don't know, you coached at Notre Dame for 10 years. You also played there for 4. I don't know if you saw the football game last week. Phenomenal finish. But anyway, what would you suggest to players who are looking to make a decision on CHL or the NCAA?
Let me start with the second last question. Of course, I saw the football game last night. Of course, my granddaughter was no. My granddaughter was in a Notre Dame T-shirt, and of course, her mom went to Notre Dame, and her dad went to Ohio State, so she's got all kinds of issues, and she's only 1 year old. You have no choice but to watch the game. You have no choice. So I've got 2 daughters that went there. All 3 of my daughters work there, so So anyway. The answer to your question, the best answer I can possibly give is yes. Both options are great. I mean, it's so individual. And in the recruiting process, one of the first questions I would ask, we'd be talking to a really highly touted young man, and the first day you could call him back then was July 1st. And do you like school? And if the answer was no, then the conversation wasn't going much further, because you have to go to class. You have to like school to go to a place like that. You have to embrace it. You have to embrace the whole process of growth as an individual. And and, figure out that maybe the statistics class that you absolutely hate is in some way helping your discipline in hockey. I don't know. And there's absolutely no answer to this question. It is so personal and so individual. I talked about contracts. I'm going to talk about, the development path the exact same way. And you can pick out a ton of guys, young stars in the league right now. Take the two defensemen, Makar and Quinn Hughes, who both went back for their second years and catapulted themselves in the league. Owen Power doing the same thing now at Michigan, the first overall pick. Brady Tkachuk, 1 year and out. And so that was his decision and has worked out very well for him. And here's the one thing I would say, though. I want a star player at some time to have been the absolute big fish in the league he played. I don't want a guy who's just a good player, because those guys don't come into the NHL and learn how to dominate a game. And if you are truly, you have to have dominated at some level, not just been a good player at some level. And the very best players know how to dominate a game. Why? Because they've done it at some point. And, Mark, I think of, I'm flashing back to a couple of years back, and that when you would look over and know you were skating beside a guy who was totally capable of taking over a game. And you also knew on the ice, there were only a handful of guys in the world that are capable of doing that.
Yeah.
But guys can do it for short periods of time, or maybe a period, or maybe a key penalty kill, but they have to be able to take over whatever they do well. And if you rush through the development stages, you don't get that. You simply don't. And, and I look at organizations, I've got a lot of friends that run major junior teams and do such a great job of development, and just that I would have no qualms about sending my son to play for. And I've also got NCAA coaches that I feel the same way about. And likewise, on both sides, I've got development situations that I wouldn't be comfortable sending my son into. So you got to do your homework. You have to absolutely do your homework. But if you're going the NCAA route to a really good academic school, you've got to have an understanding that, and so what did I learn in college? I learned balance. I learned time management. I learned leadership aspects of what I felt helped me, as a captain, as a leader in the NHL. A lot of things that I felt. Now, I was a different case because I was really small, and it was that football, the aforementioned football team. I started to grow really late in my development. I played 1 year at Tier 2 and didn't even make the team at the start of the year. And then went to Notre Dame and was still kind of a scrawny kid. And I got real sick at the start of my sophomore year, and it made me miss some time in school. So I had to stay that summer and train. And that I trained with the football team that summer between my sophomore and junior year, and took my conditioning, my love of conditioning, my ability to condition my body to a whole different level. And that affected my career in a really strong manner. So that's another aspect of it, is the off-ice part of it. Practice game ratio is much different than it is in the OHL. But once again, I look at, Stevie Stais in Hamilton is building a model organization there with Michael Andlauer. And, they're just doing a great job. And I'd have no qualms about sending my son to a program like that in the OHL.
Yeah, and I think, at least in my case, like I got to play in London. I played for the Hunters. I won the Memorial Cup there. It was literally the best case scenario. But I always look back and think, what if I didn't end up in London? What if I ended up in some other organization that perhaps wasn't as highly touted, and it didn't necessarily go my way? And that's where I kind of go back to the school reference, where I'm like, I think I missed out on that, because I played in Columbus. We knew a lot of the Ohio State players, and we could see the experience they were having. Occasionally, the odd evening, we'd go play flip cup at the hockey house and get to meet all the guys. And they were having the times of their lives, like really. And I think if it was my kid, I would probably push him, assuming he was okay with school, I would probably push him to school. But if he really had in his mind that he wanted to play major junior, I would be okay with that too. Because like you said, it's an incredibly personal decision. And there's nobody has a crystal ball and can tell you which is the right direction for your child, right? I think the kid knows best in that moment. You can give them a little guidance, but ultimately it's their decision.
And I always put the ownership on the player. When I first start talking, when I get the first call, it's from a parent that I played with, or, knew from somewhere, and said, hey, my son's got these decisions to make. And my first thing is, okay, I want to talk to him,
Exactly.
because it's up to him to do the homework and see if he wants to do this. And, I think most parents and a lot of the guys that I played with that didn't enjoy it, but saw it like you did, Mark. And I hope you were buying at that point. I hope you were treating when you were playing in the NHL and they were playing in college. But, I look at it and say, I've seen it both ways. And, I had a young man play for me, and he was an undrafted player, and he played 1 year of NCAA hockey, and he was so good. And so, and from his family situation, I sat down with him at the end of the year, and there was a lot of interest in him. And we were playing Michigan in the NCAAs that year in the playoffs. And they had an undrafted Mike Van Ryan who was scheduled to go in the first round. And my guy, Mark Eaton, was every bit as good as him at that point, was a free agent. And so, I sat down with the family after that first year at Notre Dame and said, back then it was open signing bonuses. And I just said, guys, I think you're best suited to take the next step and go to the pro game. So I didn't encourage him to stay in school because I thought it was in his best interest, everything that I looked at, to make the move when he did.
That's awesome.
It's interesting. It's a fascinating debate because people can have it all the time because it's such a different perspective on each side. All right.
Well,
finally,
you've got Tyler Boucher now, who's attracting all the attention, right? So it's, and his dad, back in a time when it wasn't as usual, especially the prep school route he had taken, went to the WHL and played. So, now his son is actually doing the opposite when it's normally the different case, when a dad played college and his son goes to major, it's the opposite in this case.
Yeah. So, and that's what made me think of it. It was just what Tyler Boucher has done. And clearly it's becomes almost the games to practice ratios that you talked about, right? There's so many games in the CHL compared to the ones you play in the NCAA, but the facilities and the practice time you get is such a greater value.
I think, and Wally, I think just to add to that, just because I experienced where my family advisor at the time, I was like 16, he took me to, I think it was Colgate or St. Lawrence University in upstate New York. And they took me down there for a game to watch before I made my decision to either play junior hockey or take the NCAA route. And I thought, at least from my personal experience, because I guess like Poulin, I was a late developed player, physically, mentally, you name it, late bloomer, if you will. And I found it incredibly intimidating when I went to that NCAA barn and watched the game, and you're watching these guys flying everywhere, and there's very physical game. For me, that turned it off for me. And I think had I gotten a little bit better guidance, maybe I probably would have pursued that route. But I just going to that game and experiencing it firsthand, it was terrifying. That's all I can remember.
That's funny. Yeah, that is interesting.
I never would have thought you would have said the NCAA was a more physical brand than playing for the London.
Well, they're playing one game a week, and they're men, right? Like think of all the piss and vinegar they have. Like these guys are fired up, and they're bigger and they're stronger. I mean, it was not even close, to be honest with you. Maybe there might be some skill discrepancies here and there, but really, I still think a good NCAA team is going to beat a good junior team any day of the week. It's not even a competition. Yeah.
Poulin?
Anyway,
do you think that's true?
I do.
No?
In the right cycle.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Yeah. Just, a school like Lake State was the first one. They were taking 20-year-old freshmen. So they had 24-year-old seniors. I mean, that's a big age gap at that point, it is. And
big time,
and then they mixed in their Dougie Waits and, their superstars with those guys. So it's usually a mix, and that's where, it's a real factor. But, you look at that Michigan team right now, holy smokes, what are they, they might be able to beat some American League teams.
Yeah. Exactly.
And they're loaded, and they've got that group of talented young kids. So I think it's cyclical, but the best teams, they played for a while. That national development program played against, and that was before they were drafted, played against OHL teams through that cycle that they did. And so they were always competitive games.
All right. Finally, number 5, and that's I want to see Poulin's face light up talking about the Broad Street Bullies versus the Danbury Trashers. If you haven't seen it, this documentary is on Netflix. It's fantastic. This brought to you, ironically, by facesmag.ca, because the Trashers were always looking to mangle Faces on a nightly basis. Facesmag.ca, some great articles in this latest issue, including on Austin Matthews and Igor Sokolov of the Ottawa Senators. All right. So, Poulin, I don't know if you've seen the documentary, but Which team would you rather face on a nightly basis, the Broad Street Bullies or the Danbury Trashers?
Well, I haven't seen the whole thing. I've seen pieces of it, and I know the premise of the story. And last week at the fantasy camp in Philly, Brad Marsh is running the organization now. He's just doing a terrific job. And there were 80 skaters there, 80 fantasy skaters, 4 teams of 20. And on Saturday night, they showed them the documentary Broad Street Bullies. I'd never seen it, guys. I played with a number of the guys. I'd never seen it. It was remarkable. Sitting in the room were Dave Schultz, Boris Kinderchuk, Bob Kelly, Joe Watson, and Billy Barber. So you had a chance to sit and watch them watch themselves through this. It was remarkable. And, you know, I was the recipient in the generation I played of benefiting from what they had created. And I remember talking to Steve Larmer, who I don't know well, at a golf tournament one day. And he said the first time he went into Philly as Chicago Blackhawk, the bus pulled into the tunnel and he stood up and no one else moved. And he looked around and he said, like, are we going in? Or he didn't even know if anybody was going to play with him that night. And it was that, I mean, and so the first team I played on, you know, had a number of those guys. They were kind of just phased out, 82, 83. And then the next generation of them came in, and boy, we benefited greatly. And people, I laugh because people say, you were the captain of the Philadelphia Flyers. Were you tough? And I'd say, I have no idea, because I never had to be. I mean, if I got involved, my own teammates got mad at me because they said, look, you're not very good at it. Don't hurt our reputation. And that's what we do. That's not what you do. And so I'll tell you what a rare makeup of characters that group was. I mean, they just were, right? It was such a different time. And I'm watching in shock. And, you know, my first mentor and roommate down there was Bobby Clark. And he would tell me stories, and he would say, sometimes on the bench, we would cringe. And it was our guys doing what they were doing on the ice. And he said, we would just say, oh man, can you believe it?
Yeah.
Just, I mean, it was a period piece almost, right? It was just it was something that had never been done to that level. The name fit, whoever dubbed them the Broad Street Bullies, that was all part of the documentary, and the rare grouping of characters. But by the way, they had some really good players on those teams. They, you know, Bernie Perrant to Clarkey to Reggie Leach to McLeish to Barber. They had superstars and Hall of Famers on that team. So that sort of gets lost a little bit in the story. I think I'm taking the age and experience of the Broad Street Bullies, Wally, to answer your question.
Well, and very fair. Like, they could play, like you talking about they had some extremely talented hockey players that got lost in it, but you guys could play the game. And I can't imagine almost the fear of having to go into that spectrum, knowing we might lose on the scoreboard and we're likely going to have our face annihilated.
Yeah, I had a great long chat with Chico Resch when we traded for him in the mid 80s. And he said, you know, you get everyone's best game because they were afraid of being beaten physically. They knew there's a chance they were going to be beaten on the scoreboard. We had some really good teams, but they were afraid to be beaten physically. And when you play a team like that, you have to be so ready that you're getting everybody's best game, which in turn then makes us better. I mean, one year, guys, we were 32-4-4 at home. Wow. Like, picture driving to the rink, knowing you're going to lose 4 games at home. I don't even know which 4 it was. You're feeling pretty good about yourself, right? Like, you're
shit.
And I laugh because I'm like, you know, there were some nights when I was nervous and I played for the home team. Like it was just, the Philadelphia took so much pride in it as fans. And it was fun at this fantasy camp because there was a real mix of guys. A lot of them came in from all over the country, and but they were Flyer fans growing up. And, you know, 2 doctors from Carmel, Indiana, who brought 2 of their buddies they played men's league with, but they'd grown up in Philly and were huge Flyer fans. But they were fans of whichever team they were a certain age at. So if they were, you know, 14 to 18 years old and their high school buddies were fans of this team, or if they were in college, they were a fan of this team. And so it was really funny because we had a nice mix of alums Johnny Leclerc was there, Danny Briere, Ian LaPerriere, Mark Howe, mentioned Marshy, Joe Watson, Keith Jones. So we had a nice mix of ages. So it was almost like someone was there from each of the generations right up through Danny Briere.
Nice.
Wow. Fascinating. All right. Those are the headlines. I want to keep talking about the Philadelphia Flyers because it fascinates me. You talked about Mike Keenan. I'm not sure. You also play with Mike Milbury as a head coach too, which I can't imagine if you can just tell by your reaction. Can you explain those two as head coaches?
I can. When I'm asked, obviously Keenan had a lot of success. I think the best suited coach for the team I played for at that time was Mike Milbury.
Wow.
And yeah, guys, he was really good. He was really, really good. He was cerebral. We had a good locker room. He knew when to take the foot off the gas. He knew when to let us go. He knew when to let us figure things out for ourselves. And I've told some stories about some of the stuff he did that I just thought was so unique. And one I don't think I've shared, it was during a playoff series. So in my 2 years with him, we went to the finals and went to the conference finals, and we lost to Mario's first cup team. So really good years. And we had a good locker room, Cam Neely, Ray Bork. We had some veterans like Gary Galley in that room. The goaltenders were both leaders, Andy Mogan, Reggie Lemelin. Some really good players. David Christian was a good player. Craig Janney was a really good player. And so Super Dave Reed was terrific. And so we were losing. I think we lost a game, and we had a meeting, and he brought in a couple of his team pictures. And he went into this long description of where these pictures were in his house. They were in a long hallway where he walked down to get to the garage. And he said, so, some days I blow right through. I'm in a rush. I got to go somewhere. And some days I stop and I look at these pictures. I think he had 3 of them. And he said, and I look at specific guys and I think about those specific guys. And I think, I'll think, that guy got every single thing he had out of himself. He shouldn't have even been in the NHL, and he forged a great career. And I'll look at another guy and go, if he'd have given us half of what he'd had, we'd have been a better team. And he said, so these pictures are going to hang in your house somewhere, this team picture from this year. Wherever it's hanging, it might be in your gym, and you look at it one day and you're going to go through different guys that you haven't thought about in years. And you're going to wonder where they are, what they're doing, and if they're satisfied with what career they had, or if they're bitter, they regret what they didn't do. And by the way, guys are going to look at you. What are they going to say about you? What are they going to say about you? So he did things like that separated him from a normal motivational speech for me. I mean, I think that's pretty cool. And I told James Duthie a story and for his book, and it was about a skate we had or didn't have, and we were on a 6-game road trip, and it was the first night we lost 3-2, and Winnipeg was loaded. They had Howard Chuck. They had a really good team. Thomas Dean was a great player, and so we lost to them. It was fine, we were going on a 6-game road trip. He didn't say a word. We weren't playing till the fall. That was a Sunday night. We weren't playing till the following Saturday in Vancouver. We had the full week off, and so we had 3 days totally off in Van. So he didn't say a word after the game. And then we landed in Van Monday morning, and he said, we're going straight to the rink. And we were like, oh, geez, here we go, right? So we get to the rink. He said, you got 20 minutes to get on the ice. So the guys are rushing to get on the ice and cursing and swearing. And, for me, 20 minutes, it took me 20 minutes to tie one of my skates. And so now we're rushing. And when we got on the ice, he made us stand right along the boards all the way along the board. So we couldn't move. And so he said, listen, we lost to a really good Winnipeg team last night. We were first overall in the NHL at this point. And he said, that really doesn't bother me. He said, but what bothers me is what's going on with some of you guys. And so I'm going to get that off my chest. We have the ice for 3 hours each of the next 3 days. I could kill you physically if I chose to. That's not what I'm going to do. But I need a workout. So I'm going to get a workout in. I'm going to go over and back twice for each one of you. But first, I'm going to tell you what's bugging me about you. So he went right down the line, Mark. And, he started with Lyndon Byers. And he said, Lyndon, you're one of the toughest guys in the NHL. Some nights you fight at a perfect time. Some nights you have no clue. Some nights you help the team. Some nights you hurt the team. You've got to figure it out, Lyndon. And you're a pretty good player. And then he pauses and goes, and by the way, I know where you were last Wednesday night. I know where you were Thursday night. I know where you were Friday night. And if that doesn't end, you won't have to worry about any of the first stuff I said because you won't be here. You won't be around.
Wow.
And he said, for that, I'm going to skate. So he goes over and back, twice. So now we're watching him, right? He's probably in his late 30s at the time, early 40s. We're thinking, holy geez, what's going to happen here? So he gets to me, he said, 3 weeks ago, we traded for the captain of the Philadelphia Flyers. He said, I walked into our locker room after our game. I couldn't believe how excited they were. We traded for the captain of the Philadelphia Flyers. Harry Stinson had actually made a move. Like he helped our hockey team. He said, you storm in here and some nights you're our best player. Some nights your head's back in Philadelphia. He said, you're not a Philadelphia Flyer anymore. When you decide you're a Boston Bruin, we're going to have a chance to win. And for that, I'm going to skate. And he goes over and back.
Wow.
And it was unbelievable. And he got to Craig Janney, who was so talented. And he looked at him and he said, you are possibly the worst conditioned 23-year-old athlete in all of the major league sports. And for you, I will skate nowhere. And he went right to the next guy.
No way.
Wow.
So,
that's brutal.
we're waiting for one guy, right? He gets to number 77. He goes, Ray Bourque. He goes, I played with number 4. He was really good. He said, you're going to go down, I don't know, top 5 in the history of the game, maybe top 4. I don't know. He said, but you still got to use the middle of the ice, don't you? You still got to step up and throw it up the middle of the ice. And he said, Ray giveaway. And now we're trying not to laugh, right? Like I'm looking at Ray and Ray is fuming and we're trying.
Is he pissed off? See, he's my favorite player of all time. I'm into this
he's
one
furious.
here. Yeah.
And so Milbury skates. By the way, halfway through, we thought he was having a heart attack, right? Sweating, turning red. We're like, what if he goes down out here? And not one of us has moved. So it goes through the whole team. And he said, if I see one of you in the next 3 days, I'll probably kill you. And he left.
No way.
Yep. And so now we're looking at each other. We haven't moved. We haven't taken a step right onto the ice. That was it. And so I think we had a little scrimmage for 20 minutes and went to the bar and talked about it. But Saturday night, and I actually went back and I believe I've checked this correctly. We beat Vancouver 7-1. And I believe Ray had a goal and 5 assists. And I went over to him after the game and said, how you doing, buddy? He said, Ray, give away my ass. So
that's awesome.
Like to me, guys, and there's a number of things along those lines that Milbury did that to me, like that's different, right? Like,
yeah,
that's different stuff. Now, he had coached for 2 years in Portland, and the deal with Harry Stinson was he was going to coach for 2 years, then be the assistant GM. So he knew what he was doing. He was only going to do for 2 years. So he had a 2-year bag of tricks. That was it. And, whereas Keenan was much more volatile, he was 35 or 36 years old and had never coached in the NHL, had been mentored by Scotty Bowman for his 3 years in the American League. And it was constant tension. Like that was his goal, was constant tension. No matter what was going on, he didn't want guys comfortable. And it started with me. And that was it. And he was just going to create controversy and tension. And we were a young, brash group. If you look at that 84-85 team, when you look at a hockey DB in 84-85, you see their ages at that point. And there were 2 19-year-olds, Derek Smith and Peter Zezel. Tocchet was 20. Ronnie Sutter was 20. Murray Craven was 20. It was ridiculous. Richie Sutter was 20. We were going to the Stanley Cup Finals and losing to Edmonton. And we're kids. I mean, really, really young. And years later, they'll begrudgingly tell you that he might have been the most important coach in their development. And see how I word that. Not the best coach they ever had, the most important coach in their development. So it's something that I don't think you could do in today's game. It was effective. If you look at his tenure in each place, it got shorter and shorter and shorter. And he won a Stanley Cup with the right exact mix of people in New York.
So did you guys win in spite of him?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes we won, like that would keep him quiet. Yeah. A lot of nights it seemed like it was us against him. And he had this thing where he would stop coaching and it drove me crazy. So I would like take over the bench. Like he wouldn't say who was up next. Like he'd just stop. He'd fold his arms and he'd just stop coaching. He'd be like, Mike, we're down 3-1 in the second period. Like, you can't get mad and stop coaching. Like it was, yeah. So I would literally take over the bench. It's enough.
That's a great
so
story.
Mark Howe, you run the defensive end. I got the forward.
Yeah.
Really?
I promise not to keep you any longer, but one of the questions, so he was known to pull goalies all the time. When you're seeing them pulled after, I don't know, maybe one shot or one goal, like what's the reaction on the bench? Or is it's just like a line change for you guys at that point?
No, I was a goalie lover. And they loved me because I'd win a defensive zone faceoff and actually come back and say hi to them once in a while.
Yeah.
And, and some of my closest friends were goalies. I was really close to Pelle Lindbergh, the dear departed, with Bobby Froze then. Hexie and I are, remain close to this day, and Mogi and Reggie in Boston and even in Washington, we had some really good goalies there, and Olaf Kolzig and Byron Defoe and Jim Carey came out of nowhere and won a Vezina in a half a season, and Donnie Beaupre was there. So, but no, there was management necessary there too. More peer-to-peer, friend-to-friend management. And you never knew when it was coming. Like it could come at 1-0. And we were in Quebec one night in the Coliseum, and the goalie, there was no room for him on the bench. And Quebec had a really good team in the mid '80s with Stasny and Hunter and all those guys, Michel Goulet, and so the goalie was on the other side in like the walkway, right? And so I think Keenan pulled Lindbergh at 1-0. Like I think he pulled him at 1-0, and it wasn't his fault. It was a power play goal or something. And so we're 5-6 minutes into the game, and so he pulls them. And I remember Frozy came over and he had to come to the bench to get his gloves and his mask. And he had mustard all down the front of his jersey. So he'd already gotten into the Chien shows in Quebec City because he figured, 5 minutes in the game, I'm not going in. I'll have them right away in case something happens,
Yeah.
So he already has hot dogs going. I said, hey, how was dinner? And he looks down and he's got mustard all down the front of his shirt.
That's awesome.
So good. One last question. I got lots for you, but we're running out of time. And that is, you talked earlier as we came on the show about time management as a head coach and being late for or about meetings. And so I just wanted to follow up with you on that.
Well, when you take over as coach, it's up to you to make sure that time is online because it's one of the critical things you have to control as an athlete. You have to be able to control your time. It's easy to control. You might not control your matchup that night, some other things, but you can control being there on time. So I played for coaches that had different philosophies. And when I played for Brian Sutter in Boston, we were a veteran team. He took over for Rick Bowness, and whole story into itself. And because we'd been to the conference finals, but Brian Sutter was available and Harry Sinnen had to have him. And, Brian would say 5 o'clock bus, and at 4:30, he'd be sitting on the bus in the front seat, just fuming because everybody wasn't on the bus. So a couple of us got together. We went to him and said, Brian, tell us what time you want us on the bus. I mean, we play 82 games in 180 days. Sometimes a half hour sleep is important. And if you want me there at 4:30, I'll be there. But if you say 5 o'clock, I'm getting on the bus at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And so I really thought a lot about it and really studied who I thought was best at it. And I learned that Glenn Sather, when he said a 5 o'clock bus, he got on exactly at 5 o'clock and nobody got on after him. So I thought, okay, well, that's really fair, right? That's good. Yep. And so that's what I instituted in college. And so little did I know I had this assistant coach who kind of cut corners a little bit on stuff like that. And it wasn't as important to him. And so the bus was leaving to go on a road trip from the rink to the arena or to the airport. And so he wasn't there at the rink. And so this is our first big road trip of the year. And I'm a brand new coach. I'd been retired 2 days when I took the coaching job. I had no idea what I was doing. None, zero. But I did know about time. And so he's not at the rink. And so the other assistant says, oh, sometimes he just goes directly to the airport, and so I'm like, okay, in other words, he misses the bus at the rink. So he goes directly to the airport. So we get to the airport, he's still not there. And then they say, your flight's canceled. Well, we were going to Alaska. We're going to Fairbanks, Alaska, which meant going South Bend, Detroit, Cincinnati, Utah, Seattle.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
It was ridiculous, right? And so I said to the bussy, like, okay, so the Detroit airport's 2.5 hours. Can we go from? Okay, let's go. So we left the assistant coach behind. And so now the guys, he wasn't there. You know, he was aiming on being there for the flight, and the flight wasn't going to happen. So the reputation was, don't be late, because we left an assistant coach to fend for himself and get to Alaska for himself.
How did he handle that, Poulin? Was he pissed?
Yeah, he was really rattled at first, but he understood. I mean, he totally got it. You know, the program, it was almost indicative of the program at the time, Mark, because the program was in disarray.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have stuff like that happen. I mean, come on.
No, I'm with you. It's crazy.
You can't miss a flight.
It's every little thing. And you mentioned it, 82 games in a small number of days. So we'd be on the road. And, you know, after pregame skate in the morning, like I'm getting everything ready because I want to make the bus at 11 o'clock to go back to the hotel because I'm hungry. I want to eat. But you always had players that were lollygagging. They're a little slower. The bus would be delayed 10, 15 minutes. So I'm on the bus in the morning, sweating in my suit because I had to hurry up thinking that the bus was going to leave at 11. And then you got the odd vet come on at 11:15, you know, and taking their time. It drove me nuts. So I'm with you. I think you got to be punctual. You got to respect everybody else's time. And when that's not respected, it just kind of trickles into every other little facet in a team, right? And that's one thing that some people don't understand. I'm still like that to this day. It drives my wife crazy, but that's the way I live my life.
Well, I'm a few years ahead of you, buddy. You're not going to change.
Yeah.
You're not going to change. So tell your wife right now, doesn't matter how long you retire, you're not changing. And your kids are going to be on time too.
Yeah,
you know, it's really funny. One of the players, Zach Kinderchuk, has a podcast called My Dad Played Hockey.
Okay.
And he posted a picture last week of his bag in an airport waiting room, totally alone. And he said, just like my dad, I'm here nice and early. The TSA wasn't even open when I got to the airport. And I sent it to my 3 daughters, who are absolute world travelers. And they were all howling. They said,
oh, yeah,
we know where we inherited. We're never missing a flight. So,
that's great.
All good.
Oh, yeah. Poulin, I appreciate you stopping by. I speaking of time management, I told you 40 minutes and we're well past an hour. So I thank you for taking the time out of your day on a Labor Day, holiday Monday to chat with us. It's been, I've thoroughly enjoyed every second of this.
Well, guys, I've enjoyed it. I've watched your podcast grow. And you know, when these things start, you guys are probably saying, how are we ever going to get anybody on it? And then you're saying, okay, we got a list of guys we got to get to. And now guys are looking at you going, I can't believe I haven't been invited on their podcast yet. What am I? So, just a pleasure to be with you guys. And good luck with everything moving forward. You're doing a great job.
Got it. Thanks,
Poulin. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take care.
There goes Dave Poulin, who's now writing for the Toronto Star. And of course, you can see him on TV on TSN. And I think he's now doing TSN 1200 radio throughout the season as well. So we look forward to more Dave Poulin as the year goes on here. Matthew, I just had a phenomenal 1-hour conversation with Dave Poulin. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was fun. It's fun to hear a guy who's not only been an excellent player and a leader in the game, but on the management side, in the broadcasting side, coaching side. So you get every angle from him. And that's what I love about it. You can pick his brain. I'm like you, Wally. I felt bad. It just goes on and on, but there's so much information coming and I'm enjoying it. So that was a lot of fun.
I didn't want it to end. Speaking of not ending, we got some more stuff to do. And that includes bringing in Craig, who's been patiently waiting for us to shut up, I guess. Craig, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Oh, I'd love to follow Dave Poulin and his unbelievable stories. This is going to be good.
Here's Craig.
Okay, yeah. You made it to the main event, kids. Like, oh my God. How good was that Ray Bork one?
Yeah, that was awesome.
We're going to cut that one out. That was great.
And you just know that he's got tons of stories to tell. And I could have kept him for another hour easily.
Yeah, he was great. Well, we do got some other things to do here. I got a couple questions from the chat just for you guys. They had a couple for Dave Poulin, but they kind of work for everybody here. Here's one for both of you guys. This comes from 204 Sens MB. They want to know, do you guys think the Sens have a 30-goal scorer on their roster this season?
We touched on that, right? I think I think they're there. And if that top line sticks together, you're getting one out of that group. You just
this
are.
Season,
so
this season,
pardon me?
This season, you think this season?
Yeah, this year. You don't think there's any potential with any of those guys? I don't know.
They haven't had a 30-goal scorer since 2012, though. Like in 10 years.
Who was the last guy we had that was even close?
McCulloch
that would have been
and
Hoff.
Spezza. No, Spezza.
No,
close.
Yeah, but what was Hoff? What did Hoff max out?
Hoff was close, 29.
29, and
so
Stoner
he
had
technically.
28.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah.
What did Connor Brown have last year? He almost had 30 last year, right?
He had him in 7 games, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's like he did it in way less games. But
and what did Brady have last season?
He was in the 20s too, right?
Yeah.
No,
yeah, like they're there, man. Like for that group, and we're talking some young players. Again, I know the show was very long, and I don't want to go on a long rant, but I'd be surprised if we don't see one in the next 2 seasons at least. Like I really think they're right there, especially the chemistry that this group, that line particularly, is already formed. We'll see.
I believe they have a 30-goal scorer in Drake Batherson. I don't think it's this season.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Okay. Matt, this one might be a little bit more for you than Brent, but just where is it here? Hot Lunch 4011 wants to know, is Parker Kelly going to be a full-time NHLer this season? I know you're a big
dark
Parker
horse.
Kelly guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just like energy guys on your fourth line because I can speak from experience from playing. I hated playing against them. There's nothing better than playing against a soft fourth liner because you're going to have time with the puck. That guy's not going to finish his check. Parker finishes all his checks. He's energetic. If he's going to take another step forward this season, I mean, he's going to vie for a position, but I don't know where they all fit, and Sokolov's another guy. Like there's a lot of players that are going to be fighting for one, maybe 2 available spots on that fourth line to begin with, at least. And then perhaps it changes throughout the year, but it's anybody's really. This is one of those seasons where a lot of your lineup for the most part is sort of set in stone, and you're going to have one available spot up for grabs. And so, you need to have a breakout training camp to really make some noise, to force management's hand to either make a trade to make room for you. Otherwise, you're going to be in the American League. And that's just how this business is run. You have to make it impossible for management to want to send you down.
That's fair. I just think that there's so many injuries throughout the NHL season that we will just see them almost rotate through, right?
For sure.
That's how I feel like they're going to get in the lineup. You're going to see.
Right.
Sokolov
I'm just talking from
Kelly.
Training camp.
Right.
I'm talking.
Question is, if Parker Kelly were to come up and get in, whether it's to start the year or through an injury, does he keep that spot? I think he can. You never know, though. He can force people's hand, right? Like we've seen it before.
What I'm saying is that's the big question. And I won't know the answer to any of these questions until I see them at camp, because I'm telling you guys, and you guys know this as well, the development from year to year with players after a long summer, it's significant. You mature, you come to camp the next year, you're more confident, you're giving guys less respect across the ice. Your game changes. That happened to me at least. So until you start watching these players play in training camp, those first couple exhibition games, it's hard to make any real predictions.
And interesting you say that. I know Drake Batherson's on a stretch here with a new contract and pays him $5 million a year, but I'm told he's coming in this phenomenal shape, that he's leaned out, and that I guess the man strength is there now, like at 23.
Hey,
I think
listen,
you'll see a huge difference in him.
Yeah. And to that point, like I ran into Brady at the wedding there a couple of weeks ago in Vegas. He's huge. He is he is a big man. And so you have him, you've got Norris, who also apparently is an absolute machine off the ice. Like you've got a lot of your core players here are very responsible athletes in the off season. That is a huge thing, where you don't have to have your team strength coach babysit players, having to travel there, check on them, make sure they're not eating chocolate every day and all kinds of junk foods or whatever it is. I think they've got it made here, and they're very fortunate. You've got 3 guys right off the bat there that are very driven in the summertime. They take good care of themselves. I think they're going to start off very strong this year.
Only if Brady signs. Did you offer by chance to get Brady a plane ticket when you were in Vegas? Like, hey,
and when I have conversations with guys, I'm not going to out them and say every little word that we've exchanged, obviously, because then no one's ever going to want to talk to me again. But I can say that, he's very well aware that the city loves him, that they're behind him. He loves playing in Ottawa. This is just business, right, at this point. Yeah. And so I'm sure he wants to get paid what's fair. Ottawa wants the same thing in return. They want a fair, balanced deal. This is just very complicated because you've got a guy who, we like to use this term, he's a unicorn, right? How do you put a value number on this player? that he brings all these intangibles to his game. So again, not surprising. I'll say this because I know a lot of people were speculating about, well, is he going to come into town? What's he going to do? And I know Poulin touched on it too. I don't think he's going to come until he signs a deal. I truly don't. I don't think you're going to see him fly into Ottawa until he's got a deal on paper signed.
And that's completely, that's common for almost any RFA that I've heard of in years.
It's bargaining.
They just don't, right? You just don't show up. That's all.
Exactly. You got to force your employer's hand, and likewise in return. And I don't have any skin in this game, obviously, but from a player standpoint, I can say that I don't see how he'll come into town unless something is finished and signed.
And just to calm the waters, that is nothing to fear. Just the contract will get done. We'd like to see it get done before camp starts, but him not being here is not a sign.
Just I know we touched on it earlier. This guy is not going to panic, right? Like he's got all the cards. He's got a family history behind him with Big Walt and obviously with his brother, all in his corner, and his agent now, that have a ton of experience in this work. So he's not going to be lacking any confidence in his own game and what he believes to be worth. So don't be surprised if this comes right down to the wire.
Okay. That's just great answers there, boys. Something that we had a couple in the chat about Logan Brown. We didn't really talk about him today. Simmer had a tweet about him as well. I mean, the Ottawa Senators, they were talking about bringing in a top center. They never really did. Is he a guy? I mean, doesn't sound like he's going to be in training camp. Who knows? No. Okay. So what's the expected return then for a guy like Logan Brown who has these issues? Like, should we be excited to get something, or are we just going to swap for another thing?
Go ahead, Wally. Sorry.
Yeah.
They've tried to move him and they couldn't last year.
Exactly.
So the expected return, it has to be low. Like, this is now just, you owe it almost. I don't know if always is the case, but Logan Brown needs to move on. The organization needs to move on. Like, Logan Brown hasn't been in Ottawa all summer, hasn't been training here. Again, and that's uncommon because he's usually spent a lot of time in this off seasons in Ottawa getting ready for the upcoming season. So it's just time to move on. Like, that's all there is. I have nothing against either side here. It's not working out in Ottawa.
And the Ottawa Senators, I mean, you can't blame the team. They're going to try to just extract as much as humanly possible out of this, right? They don't want to just give them away. They may have to at some point, but I think they played it fine. I mean, unless your player is demonstrating that he belongs full-time up in your top club, and he's got to do it in the American League as well. I know, and I'm not trying to be hard on him or any other player, but it's up to you as an individual to show the team that you belong up there. Obviously, the team is in the business of winning. If they feel like you're going to give them the best opportunity to win, you're going to be up there with the big club, and that's not the case right now. A change of scenery might be best for both sides.
Perfect. Okay, one more thing I wanted to touch on, boys. I actually had my memory jogged a little bit this week. My good friend Capital Gains on Twitter tweeted a picture that we posted on the Sens account way back at the 2018 draft. And it made me remember of a few things. I wanted to share that. And actually, you guys touched on it a little bit too, with kind of how the Hurricanes, maybe their social media is now working a little bit with their hockey ops and how that's kind of a newer thing. So it jogged my memory a little bit. Here's something we did here. Here's a picture of Kotkaniemi meeting with the scouts. This was the day before the draft. And the Sens met with Barrett Hayden the day of the draft as well. And anyway, I think this was all a Brian Morris plot, which was kind of fun to see because at the time, if you guys remember, Montreal picking third, Ottawa picking fourth. Montreal, everybody kind of knew that they were leaning towards Kotkaniemi, and everybody kind of knew Ottawa wanted Brady Tkachuk, and so Montreal was trying to get Ottawa to trade back, and so this was kind of Brian Morris helping Woody and I, and even Pierre Dorian, like to kind of maybe put out little traps out there and let people know. And so it was kind of fun to see. Montreal, I think, wanted that guy. And I mean, again, I was smart enough to stay out of a lot of rooms that had lists on them and stuff, but everything I heard, I mean, I don't think Ottawa would have been, I don't think they would have been as happy, but I think they probably would have taken Kotkaniemi at 4. Like, it wasn't.
Oh, like, for sure.
I think he was probably the 4th guy on their list. Again, I never saw the final list. I was very good at staying out of that room whenever those were up, so I could implore the power of plausible deniability. But that was an interesting draft here to see, and just to kind of see how maybe the social media side came in a little bit and some mind games and calling bluffs and stuff. It was a nice little fun day to kind of see how it all rolled out, and then to see the picks actually happen. It was pretty cool. So
nice.
Kind of ties all that back in there. Last thing we got to do, we got to wrap up some trivia from our show with Brian Boucher last week. So we had another Gong Show puck luck game to give away. These are awesome, man. So they're perfect to work on your sauce. Prizes courtesy obviously of Gong Show. So be sure to check out their sweet Wally Methot merch they've put together for us as well, along with the rest of their consistently excellent products. They're the best. So if you've been enjoying the show, think about supporting our great partners like Gong Show and head on over to gongshow.com. But if you want to win something first, well, we got a winner from this week. The question we asked was, who was the only Ottawa Senator to score a hat trick against Brian Boucher? The answer, Alex Kovalev, who actually potted 4 in that game. Yeah. So shout out to our winner at Cobden Musey, one of the two. Congrats, you got yourself a puck luck game. So keep an eye on your DMs. We're going to slide in there and figure out how to send the thing to you. So. Shout out to everyone who answered that one too. That was great.
Yeah, Kovalev. I remember coming to Ottawa. I was with Columbus. We played against the Sens, obviously, that evening, and Kovalev was playing. And he had this play where he started on the half wall with the puck, full possession, and I couldn't do anything. I never realized how strong this human being was. So I'm leaning on him. I'm cross-checking him in the back. I'm trying to, separate him from the puck. Makes a beautiful dish across the ice. Whoever it was scores, goes top shelf. I end up sitting on the bench for about 12 minutes. And after the game, I'm like pleading to my D coach. I'm like, please sit me down and show me what I could have done differently to prevent that goal. Because unless I wrap my arm around his neck and chokehold him or something, I'm not going to stop him. And so they never really had an answer. And it's still, every time I see Kovalev on the ice doing one hand shots from like the red line, like going shelf across the ice, that's like reassertion that I was not wrong and that he is in fact incredibly strong.
So every day of practice for the Sens, I used to watch this and I meant to get this recorded on camera, but so you guys line up at the circle in the middle of the ice and stretch and just shoot the shit, right?
Yeah.
At the far blue line, he would do this, have like 5 pucks on his knees, just flick pucks. And what he's trying to do is land it on the top of the net.
Yeah.
And it was effortless.
So skilled, man.
Like, yeah, I never, and people always talk about how much skill he had. I've never seen an Ottawa Senator with more individual skill than Alex Kovalev.
I agree.
Was amazing.
Yeah. And his forearms were just like massive, like when you see him off the ice, you're wondering like, who produced that human being? Like, where does this guy come from? And then you're like, well, he's Russian. So that's probably your answer. Anyway.
Needs a big mutant t-shirt.
Yeah,
all right,
he is a mutant.
Talking. We might have to have some jeans and sneakers merch too.
Yes.
People were loving Poulin's analogy on that one. That was so good.
We need our next show is coming Thursday. So I just want to remind everybody that it's going to be Craig Anderson, the best Senators goalie in history, is stopping by and one of Meth's good friends. So as we leave you, we're going to preview with a clip that's coming up in the show and wanted to say, hey, thanks for stopping by on a holiday Monday. We've enjoyed all of it. And that is the Wally Methot Show powered by Barhaven Ford. Time for us to drive on out of here. We'll see you on Thursday.
See you guys.
Did you think you were going to end up getting a deal last year? And did you go into this free agency maybe planning to retire, or was that even on your mind?
It was kind of up in the air. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I didn't want to let the pandemic kind of end the career. And so last year, just the way the timing worked of everything, Lundqvist, going through his surgery and opened up a spot, and it just kind of the way it kind of worked out was kind of meant to be. But I wasn't forcing the issue last year. We weren't like calling everybody going, I need a job. It just kind of fell in place. And then, similar to this year, like it was one of those things where I was not expecting it. Either way, could have been, could have been happily retired or, happy playing either way. So it's just kind of the way things are supposed to happen. Fate's kind of let fate do its thing and, go out there and ride the wave.